The cake incident, a lesson in respect. The upscale restaurant was buzzing with conversations and the clinking of wine glasses as Serena sat across from her husband, Mark. They had been married for 3 years, but tonight, as they celebrated Mark's promotion, something felt different. Serena had always been an independent woman, financially stable, and had contributed equally in their marriage. But Mark had been acting strangely lately, making offhand comments about how men should be the sole providers and how women should play a more traditional role. Serena brushed it off, thinking it was just stress from work. Tonight was supposed to be special. Serena had spent hours picking out the perfect dress, her rich brown skin glowing under the restaurant's dim lights. Mark had invited some colleagues, and the dinner was filled with laughter until the bill arrived. The waiter placed the sleek leather checkbook on the table, and before Serena could reach for it, Mark slid it toward her. "You got this, babe," he said casually, taking a sip of his whiskey. Serena raised an eyebrow. "I thought we were celebrating your promotion." Mark smirked. "Exactly. You should treat me." There was an awkward silence. Mark's colleagues exchanged glances, but no one said a word. Serena felt heat rise in her chest. It wasn't about the money, she could pay for the meal without flinching, but Mark's tone, the entitlement in his voice, set off alarm bells in her mind. Serena kept her voice calm. "Mark, this was your idea. I didn't agree to cover the bill tonight." His smirk faded. "Well, so now you can't do something nice for your husband? Maybe that's the problem with modern women. Always keeping score." Serena exhaled, choosing her words carefully. "It's not about keeping score. It's about respect. You didn't even ask me. You just assumed." Mark chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Then, in an act that stunned everyone at the table, he picked up the last piece of chocolate cake from his plate and threw it at her. Gasps erupted. The creamy frosting smeared across Serena's cheek and dripped onto her dress. A stunned silence followed. Serena's hands clenched into fists. Her mind raced. Mark had never done something like this before, not in public, not in private. Then she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made Mark's cocky expression falter. She calmly picked up her napkin, wiped her face, and stood up. Without a word, she grabbed the leather bill folder, pulled out her card, and paid, but not before leaving a huge tip for the waiter. Then she turned to the restaurant's manager. "Excuse me, sir," she said sweetly. "I'd like to cover everyone's bill tonight." Mark's eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing?" Ignoring him, Serena continued, her voice loud enough for the restaurant to hear. "Consider it a celebration of my success, since I was just promoted last week and didn't have the time to celebrate." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mark's colleagues stared at him, realization dawning on their faces. Serena leaned in, whispering just loud enough for Mark to hear. "You thought you could humiliate me? You just embarrassed yourself." With that, she turned on her heels, leaving Mark red-faced and speechless. The restaurant erupted into applause as she walked out, head held high. That night, Serena didn't go home. By morning, she had called a lawyer. Mark had made a fool of her in public, but Serena? She was about to show him what real power looked like. Mark sat frozen in the restaurant as Serena disappeared through the doors, his colleagues whispering amongst themselves. He had expected her to laugh it off or maybe argue, but walking away? Paying for everyone's dinner like she was the boss of the evening? That was something he didn't see coming. As he stormed out of the restaurant, wiping sweat from his brow, Mark grabbed his phone and called Serena. No answer. He called again. Voicemail. His hands trembled as he hailed a cab home. He wasn't worried about the cake incident itself. He had embarrassed Serena before, belittled her in private, dismissed her achievements like they were nothing. But tonight felt different. When he arrived home, the house was eerily quiet. Serena's car was gone. His heart pounded. He checked the bedroom. Her closet was half empty. Her jewelry was gone. Her laptop, missing. A single note was left on the bed. "I deserve better. Don't call me." Mark let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's just mad," he muttered to himself. "She'll be back." But deep down, something told him she wouldn't. The realization days passed. Serena's absence was noticeable. Mark tried calling her friends. No one would tell him where she was. He went to her workplace, only to be told she was on personal leave. The realization started to sink in. Then came the final blow. A divorce petition arrived at his office, neatly filed, citing irreconcilable differences and a request for full separation of assets. Attached was a copy of a prenup he had forgotten all about, one that protected her wealth, not his. Mark's stomach dropped. Serena had always been successful, he knew that. but he had never cared enough to learn just how successful she was. While he had been bragging about his promotion, she had been quietly building her empire. A friend from their social circle finally spilled the truth over drinks one evening. "You really messed up, man. You knew Serena was a rising star in her company, right?" his friend said, swirling his whiskey glass. Mark scoffed. "She's just in marketing or something." His friend shook his head, amused. "Marketing? Bro, she just got promoted to vice president at her firm. Her salary probably triples yours." Mark's jaw clenched. "She's been leveling up while you've been trying to drag her down," his friend added with a smirk. "That little stunt you pulled? You threw cake at a woman who could have bought that whole damn restaurant if she wanted to." Mark sat there in silence, ice melting in his untouched drink. The new Serena months passed. Serena was thriving. She had moved into a sleek high-rise apartment, started a new fitness routine, and traveled to Europe for a much-needed vacation. She was glowing. Meanwhile, Mark spiraled. The divorce finalized quicker than he expected, and Serena walked away without looking back. One evening, he saw her again. She was at a charity gala, standing on stage, speaking with confidence and grace. The crowd adored her. She wasn't just successful, she was powerful. And next to her, a tall, sharp-dressed man, listening intently, laughing at her jokes. The way he looked at her, respectfully, admiringly, was something Mark had never done. It hit him then. He had lost her. Not because of one night, one argument, or one bill, but because he had never treated her like the queen she was. And now, another man was ready to. The moral of the story: never underestimate a woman who knows her worth. Because once she does, no amount of cake or apologies can make her come back. Mark stood at the back of the gala, his hands stuffed into his pockets, watching Serena light up the room. It was painful to see, because once upon a time, she had been his. But now, she was untouchable. She laughed effortlessly, her smile genuine, her presence commanding. The man beside her, tall, confident, and undeniably successful, leaned in as she spoke, completely enthralled by her. Mark clenched his jaw. He had spent months trying to justify what he had done. He told himself Serena had overreacted, that she was just being dramatic. But deep down, he knew the truth. She had given him chance after chance. She had supported him, believed in him, even when he didn't deserve it. And how did he repay her? By humiliating her. He thought about all the times he dismissed her accomplishments, all the times he made her feel small. That cake-throwing incident wasn't the start of their downfall, it was just the final straw. Mark exhaled sharply and turned to leave. But before he could slip away, Serena's voice rang out behind him. "Mark." His breath hitched. Slowly, he turned around, forcing a smile. Serena. She looked as stunning as ever, stronger, wiser. But there was no anger in her eyes. No resentment. Just a calm finality. "I saw you watching," she said, tilting her head. "Did you want to say something?" Mark swallowed hard. He hesitated. "You look good." She smiled politely. "I know." Silence stretched between them. Serena glanced at the man beside her, who had stepped away to give them a moment. He met her gaze, nodding slightly, a silent check-in. Mark noticed. That's what real love looks like, he realized. Not control, not belittlement, but partnership. For the first time in his life, Mark finally understood. And for the first time, he let her go. He nodded. "Take care, Serena." She gave him one last knowing smile. "I already am." With that, she turned back to her new life, one without him. Mark walked out into the night, knowing he had lost something truly irreplaceable. And Serena? She never looked back. The end.